Predictably, she confronts the whispers, the investigative theories suggesting internal complicity within the family unit itself. We are dissecting those specific details and the broader implications immediately. In this line of work, maintaining situational awareness over breaking developments is the only way to survive the noise. However, the current information landscape is compromised by bias, making objective truth a rare and elusive commodity. Raw data is the only foundation for trust. Their specialized interface surfaces critical intel often buried by the mainstream narrative. They deliver clinical analysis that bypasses the emotional theatrics, accessible via their secure digital platforms. The system maps out ideological leanings, categorizing sources to ensure absolute transparency in the intelligence cycle. If you require a more surgical approach to information gathering, look toward these direct facts. Disregard the spectacle. Focus on the evidence. Returning to our analysis, Guthrie's Thursday briefing was profoundly devastating. It was gut-wrenching. No other clinical descriptor fits the weight of that testimony. She has broken her silence, returning to her home network to document the disappearance of her mother. 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie vanished 54 days ago from her Tucson residence on February 1st. The observation is grim, yet this testimony is critical. It serves as a vital data point across multiple investigative tiers. We often lose the human element beneath the mountain of suspects, forensic leads, and law enforcement jargon. This is the systematic dismantling of a family unit, a relentless psychological grind occurring every single hour. Crucially, we must assess the current state of the family's internal knowledge and their proximity to the truth. What were the operational realities they faced as each dark chapter of this case unfolded? With 0 arrests and no viable suspects identified, what intelligence can we glean from their perspective? I will deconstruct her statements to Hoda and provide the necessary forensic context. This is only Phase 1 of the release. Phase 2 is scheduled for dissemination tomorrow, Friday morning. Savannah details the moment the anomaly was confirmed. She recounted the call, "Mom is missing." Her reaction was disbelief, asking for clarification only to be told her mother had simply vanished into thin air, referring to her sister's report. Per the record, Savannah's husband was off-site that weekend, leaving the residence empty Saturday night. Upon their return on Sunday, they received the initial contact from Savannah's sister, Annie. Recall the timeline. Nancy was last confirmed at Annie's residence on the evening of January 31st. Following dinner at 5:32, she was transported home by Tommaso Cion, arriving at approximately 9:48 that night. He witnessed her entry before departing. Forensic telemetry shows the garage door cycled shut at 9:50 p.m. It wasn't until the following day, February 1st, that the subject was officially flagged as a missing person. A contact notified the family when Nancy failed to appear for services. Confidential sources report a long-standing routine. Nancy and her social circle. They gathered for remote viewings of services streamed from New York. At this juncture, the sheriff's department was officially notified. Savannah notes the initial working hypothesis was a localized medical emergency. To be honest, our internal analysts initially leaned toward that same medical theory when the case first hit our radar. But here is where the narrative fractures. This is the exact moment the investigation shifted. Savannah informed Hoda of a critical physical anomaly. The rear exits of the residence were found standing open. They speculated an emergency medical extraction had occurred, prompting a frantic sweep of all local trauma centers. The search yielded nothing. There have been whispers regarding signs of forced entry at the scene. Law enforcement has yet to verify those breach reports. The strategic reason for this silence remains classified. They may lack definitive forensic proof, or they are withholding details about the abduction for tactical reasons. They are keeping their cards close, particularly regarding items left at the scene of the crime. They avoid public statements until certainty is absolute, fearing any premature disclosure could compromise the integrity of the case. Consider the point of entry. No shattered glass, no splintered frames. It lacks the typical hallmarks of a violent breach. This absence of forced entry dictates our theory on how she vanished from that residence. We track the biological clock. Her pacemaker severed its link to the mobile device at precisely 2:28 in the morning. Field agents deployed electronic signal interceptors via aviation units to sweep for that specific frequency from above. It establishes the window of disappearance and highlights a grim reality. The subject's survival clock was ticking. Analyze the physical profile. Her daughter detailed a history of chronic physiological distress, a debilitating back condition. Observe the medical data. On her best days, reaching the mailbox was a physical ordeal. Most days, it was an impossibility. This wasn't a voluntary departure. This wasn't a wandering senior. It shifts the profile entirely from a standard missing persons case. In these extractions, minutes are blood. We have an 84-year-old female with severe locomotive impairment. She is entirely dependent on pharmaceutical intervention for her survival. If she was taken, her captors face a logistical nightmare. How do they maintain a dying asset without her specific prescriptions? Movement is restricted. The extraction route would be limited by her extreme fragility. Investigative leads took us south, 60 miles from Tucson, across the wire into Nogales, Mexico. We analyzed the probability of a cross-border transit during that initial window. The border is porous. Theoretically, a human could be moved across while accessing the unregulated medications she requires. To be precise, it remains a hypothesis, currently unsupported by definitive forensic confirmation. We revisit the threshold. Blood evidence on the exterior. The digital witness of the doorbell camera. It's a haunting detail in the case file. Serology confirmed biological material at the entrance. The sheriff verified it belonged to the victim. The mechanics of how that blood was deposited remain a psychological enigma. The integrity of the scene was compromised. Perimeter tape was removed prematurely, allowing civilian traffic to contaminate the site. Those early visuals of the spatter were telling for the investigation. Internal reports suggest secondary blood signatures were also located inside the structure. Forensic technicians recovered genetic material within the domicile. This was processed through investigative genetic genealogy, matching DNA profiles against public ancestral records. A digital manhunt to isolate a specific biological lineage and identify a suspect. We've seen this tech break high-profile cold cases before. We wait for a match, watching for the inevitable slip-up. This represents the most viable path to a breakthrough in this investigation. The timeline shifts back. The front door camera went dark at 1:47 a.m. Mark the timestamps. They define the cold moment of the abduction. Sensors logged a heat signature 25 minutes after the blackout. Unknown origin, possibly animal, possibly the suspect. Official records from the sheriff corroborate this window. After weeks of deep dive analysis, the family is left with a void. Zero actionable intelligence. They are haunted by the total silence surrounding her fate. There is a heavy psychological toll as the daughter wonders if her own public profile painted a target on her mother. The motive could be as primitive as perceived wealth, a high-value target for a quick, desperate payday. The psychological burden of that thought is catastrophic. The crushing guilt of believing her career invited the predator to her mother's bedside. The thought that she is the indirect catalyst for this horror. Listening to that level of trauma is a visceral experience for any investigator. It's an investigative reality we must confront in cases involving public figures. Was it an opportunistic theft or a surgical strike against a high-profile family? Did the suspects know whose sanctuary they were violating, or did they panic? There is a darker profile being drafted, one suggesting a calculated, sadistic operation. There is a specific brand of predator who finds gratification in the raw suffering of a family under this kind of scrutiny. Why ignore the money? Savannah's family has authorized a $1 million reward, a payout most wouldn't walk away from. Observe the evidence. If this is the reality we must face, then we will have to find a way to endure it. Our objective is simple. We need her location. This woman needs to be returned to her home and her family. To that end, a reward of $1 million is authorized for any actionable intelligence leading to her safe recovery. She made it clear you can utilize the tip line with complete anonymity. Your identity remains shielded. In her discussion with Hoda, Savannah addressed the influx of ransom demands, many of which were deemed tactical distractions or noise. She noted that anyone capable of sending a fraudulent ransom note possesses a psyche that is deeply, perhaps irredeemably, fractured. However, she's inclined to believe that two specific communications they received and vetted are actually authentic. Savannah was also questioned regarding the chilling doorbell surveillance that captured the image of that masked figure. It was Director Kash Patel of the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Department who went public with those haunting perimeter images. The psychological toll of imagining that specific individual standing over her bedside is a weight no one should carry. It is nearly impossible to process. It's simply too much for the human mind to reconcile. Let's establish more context for this investigation. The subject is described as a male with an average build, approximately 5 feet 9 to 5 feet 10 inches tall, masked. He carried a backpack and a flashlight, wearing gloves while attempting to obscure the lens with local foliage, a calculated move. Digital forensics recovered data showing the suspect used a black, 25-liter Ozark Trail hiking pack during the incident. Tactical analysis indicates his attire, particularly the mask, consists of items easily acquired at a major retailer like Walmart. Investigators have been scrubbing surveillance and digital footprints from local Walmarts and their online fulfillment centers for any transaction matches. According to Sheriff Nanos, the task force has already secured the procurement records for that specific model of backpack. There was a significant setback involving a pair of black gloves discovered by authorities roughly 2 miles from Nancy's residence. Visually, they appeared to be a match for the suspect's kit, but visual evidence requires biological confirmation. They processed the DNA profile, but it failed to trigger a match in CODIS, the FBI's national database of known offenders. We are talking about millions of entries, yet the search for a biological hit returned nothing but static. It later surfaced that the DNA on those gloves belonged to a local restaurant employee, effectively ruling them out as evidence. Regarding the digital data pulled from the security system, there is a conflicting timeline. Sheriff Nanos mentioned that Google initially flagged an image from January 11th, which would mean the house was being cased. That theory of reconnaissance hit a wall when Google retracted the statement, withdrawing their support for that specific timestamp. The sheriff stated that Google now claims the precise timing of those images may remain a permanent mystery. Consequently, we still don't know if this masked predator was stalking the property in the days leading up to the abduction. Reports also surfaced that the Bureau was monitoring firearm sales in the Tucson area, though that lead hasn't been further substantiated. There's another revealing layer from that interview with Hoda that warrants closer psychological examination. Savannah spent a great deal of time profiling the family's internal strength, describing them as a unified, unbreakable front. She stood by the fact that no one provided better care for her mother than her sister and brother-in-law. Nancy was their cornerstone, their matriarch, and her brother was her primary protector. Their lives revolved around her light. She described her siblings as a brilliant unit, noting her sister's preternatural sense of intuition, faith, and emotional complexity. It feels as though they've consolidated their individual strengths. They are drawing on their heritage and their faith to find the precise words for this impossible situation. Every public statement is a collective decision. There is no deviation. The reality of this nightmare remains completely surreal. It's unthinkable filming a message to a kidnapper who seized a frail, 84-year-old woman in the dead of night, barefoot and without medication. She expressed relief that the suspect's footage was released, hoping it would dismantle the groundless theories targeting her family. Her reaction to that public speculation is a window into their current state of mind. It simply layers more trauma onto an already devastating situation. There are no words to describe that level of psychological weight. Her silence is heavy. She's projecting a narrative of total cohesion, as if their bond was an ironclad alibi. This play was predictable. A forensic look at their digital footprint shows a family that appears untouchable by suspicion. Those archives wouldn't exist if the inner circle were actually under the magnifying glass of a criminal profile. Let's be precise about the facts. Sheriff Nanos officially cleared the Guthrie bloodline and their partners, characterizing them as cooperative casualties rather than persons of interest. Accusations are a psychological assault. The family remains a single, unified pulse, standing together against the noise. Consider the February 7th briefing, where Savannah stood flanked by her siblings in a display of calculated desperation. We've acknowledged the signal. We are begging for the return of our matriarch to begin the process of closure. Peace is our only currency now. We are prepared to settle any debt to secure her homecoming. And again, the pattern holds. The sisters' presence was a strategic countermove against digital whisper campaigns targeting the brother-in-law, Thomas O. The data from the precinct and the family's testimony provide zero traction for those reckless online theories. Shifting the focus now, analysts tracking this file see fractures in the procedural handling, specifically regarding the integrity of the primary crime scene. Questions remain about the Bureau's late entry and whether Pima County was effectively synchronizing intelligence with federal assets. Currently, there is a coordinated push to strip Sheriff Chris Nanos of his badge and authority. The internal revolt is reaching a critical mass. The Pima County Deputies Organization delivered a unanimous vote of no confidence, demanding an immediate resignation from the top. They cite a history of professional misconduct, a disciplinary paper trail that makes his continued command statistically untenable. During the session, Hoda pressed for the psychological reality of how the family views this fractured investigation. Savannah admitted the boots on the ground are exhausted, yet the void of missing answers remains a haunting vacuum. We cannot find a baseline of peace without the truth. She concluded the interrogation with a chillingly simple sentiment. Redemption has no expiration date, and that is where their collective psyche is currently anchored. This follows a formal communiqué issued by the estate just a few days ago, which reads as follows. We feel a deep sense of gratitude for the support echoing from the citizens and neighbors within Tucson. We believe the key to this cold case remains hidden within the local geography of southern Arizona. A secret is being kept. A neighbor might hold a fragment of data they've dismissed as trivial, unaware it carries the weight of the case. Scour your logs for January 31st, the early hours of February 1st, and the late evening of January 11th. We are asking this community for a forensic re-examination of their own memories and observations. Review your dashcam archives, digital notes, and text threads. The smallest anomaly could be the catalyst for a breakthrough. No detail is too microscopic. Every breath is a reminder of the absence that prevents our family's tranquility. We cannot grieve. We can only analyze the ache. Our mission is binary. Find her and bring her home. We intend to honor her life, but the final chapter cannot be written until she reaches her resting place. Thank you for your relentless vigilance. Signed, the Guthrie Collective. Cameron, Christine, Tommaso, Savannah, and Michael. I suspect tomorrow's briefing will reveal even more about the tactical landscape of this investigation. Savannah Guthrie is engaging in narrative control, neutralizing misconceptions before they can contaminate the public's perception of the case. She is fighting the decay of interest. In this cycle, a high-profile story can vanish in a heartbeat. Global chaos creates significant noise. This investigation, once a primary signal, is being drowned out by newer frequencies. To get resolution, the family must force the public to snoop through their own lives for missing evidence. It requires a high-profile, offensive, calculated statements and deep-dive interviews to keep the trail from going cold. The final piece of this puzzle likely sits in the mind of a civilian who hasn't realized what they saw. That is the current status of our dossier. Stay vigilant. Subscribe to our updates on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you monitor your intelligence feeds. You can also track our investigative reports on the Peacock Network. Trace the digital trail on X and Instagram, or intercept the nightly briefing Monday through Friday at 11 p.m. Eastern. Until the next file, dismissed. To be perfectly candid, our intel is at zero. We are operating in a total vacuum of information. I found myself repeating, "I am so sorry, Mom." We have just analyzed the initial phase of Savannah Guthrie's sit-down on the morning broadcast. This marks her primary public statement regarding the forced disappearance of her 84-year-old mother, Nancy. The footage is haunting and heavy, peeling back the psychological layers of a family enduring this prolonged trauma.